Sticking with us is Dave Rubin, host of the political talk show, The Rubin Report on YouTube. We've talked Trump, we've talked classical liberalism, we've talked about so many different things. Okay, so Dave, I sat through what felt like a very enjoyable, endless hours of Rubin Report. And there's a couple very specific things I want to touch on because I feel like they might be attacks on me personally, not directly, but de facto. You said in an interview, with Ben Shapiro, that liberalism is basically a mental disorder. What did you mean by that?
I don't think I said liberalism. I might have said progressivism.
Or maybe you said the left is basically a mental disorder. I think the idea was progressivism, the leftism, whatever the case may be, is basically a mental disorder.
For the record, if I said liberalism, then it was an absolute brain freeze. But I'm 99% sure I didn't say that.
It may have been before. It may have been before you started, before you shifted language on it. It was a little bit ago.
Yeah, I don't think so, though. But anyway, I'm sure that some of the internet sleuths around here will find it. I'm pretty sure I said progressivism.
Okay.
Well, first off, it had nothing to do with you,
No, I know it didn't personally, but I am curious, like, what about progressive ideology strikes you as being a mental disorder?
Okay, so first off, I said it in a glib way. Do I think it's an actual mental disorder? No, I don't think it's a mental disorder that should be studied. And I would like to study a couple of these progressives, but I would study some conservatives too. And one, you could probably figure out that their brains are wired a little differently. Okay, fine. So putting that aside, I was being glib, obviously, but the point that I'm trying to make is that it's sort of what I just said to you in the previous segment. If your issues are think about all I was on TYT for years. Everything's about the government's horrible, everyone's corrupt, everyone's evil, corporations, money is destroying everything, billionaires, blah, blah, blah. What's your answer? Make the government bigger, tax people more, force the government to do more, blah, blah, blah. That seems antithetical to logic and reason. So yes, it is not a mental disorder, but I think basically if you could get a group of progressives to sit down and not scream at you that you're a bigot and a racist and a homophobe, which, by the way, I'm sure that there are people that use those slurs on you, even though you are of the left and consider yourself a progressive. I think if you could get some people to sit down and really talk about ideas and these principles and the philosophic underpinnings of the things that we're talking about, I think you could get people to understand that if your problem is the corruption, the problem is the money and all of those things, then stop making the problem bigger. That this isn't about what the founding fathers intended. They intended a very weak federal government and local control and local power and state power, and I'm for all of those things. So yes, the comment was done glibly, but I assure you it had nothing to do with David Pakman.
Well, I think that this is where, we sort of get to what I think is my core disagreement with you, aside from like really specific policy things. Like it seems like we're sort of in a different place on tax policy, for example. Sure. We probably don't agree exactly on what the size of the government should be. But you and I have talked privately about our concerns with the sort of speech policing, trigger warning, safe space stuff. We've both talked about that. We've expressed concern about some knee-jerk positions that don't seem fact-based on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, et cetera. I think it's a matter of degree that I think you believe that those issues are much bigger among the left than I perceive them to be. And I've talked about the college campus stuff that's going on, but I still think it's limited to a particular type of mostly, liberal arts colleges. I don't think it's the major issue that some of your guests make it out to be. Are we sort of having a disagreement on the degree to which these issues are a problem?
Yeah, so I would say that's a fair place to have a disagreement, which, by the way, I love having a disagreement. Pakman, I like you. I consider you a friend. You were going to do my show if you were going to be in LA last week. It didn't work, but we'll get you in here. The whole point of this experiment, as I described it before, of America, is that we're supposed to disagree on these things. We're supposed to disagree and be able to walk away and realize that we want to live in the same society because I don't want to kill you for your beliefs, and hopefully you don't want to kill me for mine. So as for the free speech stuff, no, I don't think that I'm overstating it or that my guests are overstating it. This idea of the trigger warnings, of the safe spaces, of the speech police, of deplatforming Richard Dawkins at Berkeley, which is happening on August 7th. He's been deplatformed. I'm actually interviewing him in New York at the 92nd Street Y on August 8th. They haven't stopped us yet, but I'm sure there will be people that aren't happy that we're doing that. This kind of insanity, stopping Jordan Peterson from speaking. I'm sure I don't have to tell you about what happened with Brett Weinstein up at Evergreen State. So Evergreen's a great example, by the way, because this is supposed to be the most left. You could argue that this is the most left college in America, or certainly in the top 10. So you would think that they would have all this harmony, that these ideas of non-racism and plurality and all of this stuff and multiculturalism would have worked. But the students there would have you believe that this is some sort of insane, racist, crazy place. Brett Weinstein was fighting racism. He was fighting segregation on campus.
No, I get that. And I defended him. I mean, I got a call about it a couple of weeks ago and I defended him. And, you know, a lot of my family is college professors. And I've got an announcement to make about a college involvement that I'm going to be having. And from everything I'm looking at, there are these several dozen examples that you cite. But the idea that the left at large has been taken over by this, it's like I went to the Women's March rallies here in Boston, and there was about 10% stuff that I thought was totally unproductive and a shutdown of attempts for open debate. And it was bad, and I'm against it. But I'm just not on board that it's a problem to the degree that you think it is. And I think it's really easy to look at these isolated incidents and believe that it represents everybody on the left, but I'm just not seeing it.
Well, first off, I've never said it represents everybody on the left. It represents what the mainstream left has become, without question. Now, we can just disagree on the percentage there, and that's fine. But look, we know that they've done a zillion studies on it. I don't want to quote the number wrong, but that's something like 80 or 90% of professors in America are liberal to left. Now, it depends what you mean by liberal, of course, in that case. But we know that the conservative viewpoint is not being taught in colleges. And by the way, it's leaking into not just the humanities, it's actually leaking into the science stuff. And I was at a conference with about 400 college professors in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and many people were talking about that. So I've talked to tons of professors about this. I would recommend if you can get Jonathan Haidt on your show, I think he's doing the best work on this, and runs something called the Heterodox Academy, which is about getting more diversity of thought at college campuses. But when I go to college campuses, I get kids from every walk of life and every color and sexuality and all that stuff, all that diversity that the left loves. I care about diversity of thought more. But I get kids saying that their teachers are telling them to use certain gender pronouns. They say, well, I'm not against trans people, but if I see someone and they happen to look like a man, I'm going to say he or him, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. And they want them to use Z or Z or whatever the hell it is. That these ideas which are taking root in the left, this strange alliance with Islam, all of this stuff that's taking root in the left is not being countered by anyone on the left. Actually, anytime someone on the left tries to counter it, they're kicked out. And I think you can probably speak to that yourself. And certainly,
listen, I get criticized. No, there's no doubt. I mean, I'm on the left and I counter it. I've not yet been kicked out of any place. None of my college speaking events that are planned for the fall have been canceled so far. I mean, if it happens, I'll absolutely tell you, as well as my audience, you know?
Yeah, I don't know what your specific criticisms have been that they would lead them to kicking you out.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, there is no question in my mind that people that are thought of as traditionally right at the moment are being more tolerant of other ideas than people of the left. It's just, I see this in every walk of life. I also fear that the biggest problem we have right now is that the ideas of the left, of a bigger state, of taking more, of the collective versus the individual. I would recommend your audience watch either of my interviews with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who does a wonderful explanation of the individual and why we have to care about individual rights as opposed to collective rights.
Yeah.
These ideas of the left, I think, are a far bigger, because they've taken such root with young people, I think they're a far bigger threat to the future of this pluralistic, wonderful society that we have than anything that I see coming out of the right at the moment. You could actually make lots of arguments that the right has changed. There's virtually no one on the right that cares about gay marriage anymore. That's a pretty significant thing.
You should see the people that write to me, Dave. You should see the people that write to me. No, listen, I mean, I think that's listen, what we've now gotten to the maybe biggest disagreement that we have, which is
Nope.
I really believe that the opposite of what you just said is true, which is that these are relatively sort of compartmentalized problems on the left. And unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time. I think the audience will not be shocked to hear that we disagree on that. But
30 seconds.
Okay, yeah.
Give me 30 seconds here. Who on the left, besides you, is calling this stuff out? Who is calling out this crazed intersectional lunacy of the Dyke March? And who's calling out Linda Sarsour and all that? You know what? They're not. They're actually tweeting more and more. I stand with her, Bernie and Van Jones and all of these people. So who is doing it in an effective way, calling out their worst elements?
I don't know. I don't know any of those people. I'm in my silo here in Boston.
But think about that, and that's why I'm saying they're being led by their worst elements because people are afraid to step up because they'll be called racist and bigoted and all that other shit. So that's the part that's why I believe that it is so corrosive and it is silencing people in a really dangerous way.
Dave Rubin, host of the political talk show, The Rubin Report. I don't know whether we've solved any problems during this conversation, but it's been fascinating. And I think that just having it is something that hopefully my audience will enjoy. Dave, thanks for taking close to an hour of your time to talk to me today.
My pleasure, Pakman. Let's do it again.